Good evening and welcome to another episode of Am I Doing This Wrong? I'm one of your hosts, Ryann, and I am super excited to be here with my co-host.
Hi, I am Morgan. I'm very excited to be back for another episode as well. What are we talking about, Ryann?
We're talking about a lot of things. I mean, first off, as always, right? Can't keep anything straight. But I do want to check in with you first. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Worked today. That's basically it. Nothing too exciting to report. Still a little sore from a spin class I took 2 days ago. But you know, I needed a workout. I need to be active again. I'm working on it. So that was good. Still sore though. Yeah.
That's good. That's basically how workout classes go. It's like you get it in, right? Like you're making up for like all the lost months that you said you'd go. Right. I did the same thing yesterday. Yeah, I went to a step class and I swear to you, this lady has been doing the step class since the 80s. Oh. Like I think she created the step class. I'm pretty sure.
She invented step classes. It's wild.
Exactly. The idea of the step was from this lady. Yeah, she's awesome. But she's like showing us all up. She's like doing all the steps and we're all like looking at her like, am I doing this right? Which, you know, I was probably doing it wrong. Of course,
you just as always. Neck was sore a little bit ago, so.
My neck is sore and it's not from my sexual encounters. So it could be. I mean, that could have added to it. I don't know. It's either that or I have COVID. I'll let you know. Either way.
Okay. I know. Yeah, keep us posted.
Yes. But speaking of sexual encounters, this week we have a pretty hot topic, you know, hot and bothered topic, if you will. I think we will.
I think we're going to.
And we're probably already doing it. Most people our age have probably had sex in multiple different ways with multiple different people. Or that's just me. I don't know. We don't all have HPV. I don't know. But yeah, this episode is going to be about our topic. Basically, we want to know, is there a difference between sex in a relationship versus sex when you're single, right? And so I think that this question, it came from a lot of things. It came from us not coming enough and not having enough orgasms as single people. Like, I feel like I just thought that sex was always going to be kind of this thing that was like good, but not always great. You know what I mean? Like, sex was interesting and it was fun, but it was more about like the chase of it, right? Like that part was more exciting.
Absolutely.
Than the actual sex.
Yeah, the thrill of it, the excitement behind it is definitely, more of a thrill than the act, at least in my experience.
Right.
And I think you were generous in saying good, not great, because I think that's a generous statement is all I'm saying from my experience. So,
well, we want to dive into all of the experiences. So I think the biggest thing for me is now, obviously, so us as co-hosts, right, and as friends, we've shared a lot of our sexual experiences, encounters with each other, not like literally with each other. I mean, we've been there too. We've dabbled. We've been in all of the realms. Episode, yeah, that is for a completely different episode. But right now, I am in a committed relationship. We are committed to each other. We're interested in dabbling outside of, you know, our relationship, but it's COVID times. So that's a lot of unwanted like bacteria and virus that we just really can't handle in the house right now. But then we also have, you know, you are my co-host and you are a single gal living it up.
Well,
so
okay. I appreciate that. I don't know if living it up, but I'm trying. Yeah.
Hey, it's a process. It's a journey.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's just been COVID. It's been a slow time for a single lady, you know?
But
Slow time. We'll
just
get
want
into it.
to emphasize that
Yeah.
it's slow. It's slow
Yeah.
coming, literally.
Literally.
And so basically, there's a few different questions that I kind of want to ask and throw out there to both of us, because I think that our perspectives are somewhat similar because we spent a lot of years being single together, going out, meeting different people, and whether or not we, did the do with that person, right? Whether or not we actually hooked up or not, didn't always dictate whether we had a good time or whether it was an interesting, time or night or things like that. And so I think that some of that like chase, some of that excitement is sometimes lost when you get into a relationship because you know that person, right? And so I think there's pros and cons to both. And I had a really fun time looking up research for this episode. I think that people are a lot more forthcoming and vulnerable when it comes to talking about relationship sex versus single sex. And that's what I think that was kind of like my expectation going into it. Yeah. So anyways, the research versus my expectations was really interesting. And so I think I found some interesting things, and I just have some questions. I want us to get into some personal stories. So yeah, here we go.
Here we go. Although I do have a quick comment on people being more forthcoming with sex in a relationship. Okay. I feel like then you have a partner to think about. I mean, do you mean that in a sense of being free about talking about it, or are we going to get into that?
I mean, yes.
You gave a knowing nod, and so
I thought that far ahead. No, well, yes. So I was thinking, this was just my outlook because I am in a relationship. So yes, that is true. You have someone else to consider, right? And depending on how open or, private that person is, you might be a little less, quick to just give everything, right? And do like a tell-all. Right. However, for me, I thought that because a lot of times when you're single, there's like stigmas to how many people that you hook up with, or how experienced you are, you know what I mean? Right. If you're not in a relationship, then who are all these experiences happening with, right? And good so question. A lot of women, yeah, right, exactly. And so a lot of women, or people that might feel a little bit more societal pressure to maybe be quiet about their experiences, right?
Okay.
So that's where I was coming from.
Yeah, that makes sense too. Yeah.
So that's one idea. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is if there is a difference, if you actually think that there is a difference, sex in a relationship versus sex while single. Okay. And so when I say relationship, I want to elaborate on what I mean, because relationship, I don't generally mean like you have to be in a committed, monogamous, only this person having sex. More so like relationship as, do you know this person, right? Is this not your relationship, meaning like this isn't your first time meeting, and that you may be comfortable with this person like socially, but also sexually, and in the bedroom. Like that's more so what I mean in relationship. Okay. So I'm not only speaking from my, current relationship. I'm just talking about any time that I had a more normal, regular partner. Okay. So so I want to answer this question first. Would you like me to go first, or do you want to jump into it? Do you have some ideas about it?
I mean, I have ideas about it, but I think my perspective is a little skewed because I haven't, been in relationships that much in my 20s. And so, I feel like I have a lot of experience on the other side of the verses. But I think in general, the more comfortable you are with someone, the more open you might be. But then as I say that, I think, well, then, if you're thinking you're never going to see this person again, maybe you do want to try something new, something different. So that also, I kind of feel like it could be both ways.
So I think so. I think it can go both ways. So I will say from my own experience, I definitely, I've only had a few relationships in my, span of being an adult. However, I do feel like I was much more experimental and like excited and curious with hookups, because just for that reason.
Okay.
Like I felt much more, I didn't have anything holding me back, right? Because I'm probably never going to see you again. And that's like, even if I know your name.
That's some pressure taken off, right? Like,
right.
Your face. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, definitely pressure taken off. And also just because, like, let's be real, when you're hooking up with somebody, just like, on one of our previous episodes about body hair, like, this guy tells me to trim and I'm like, excuse me, sir. Like, first of all, you may never see me again.
Right.
It's like, take it as it comes. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Take me as I am. But in a relationship, you do, like, just like I said, with my partner, I consider a lot more things for him because I want that to be pleasing and exciting every time. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's that.
Right.
But I will say that as a single person, there is pressure to, like, I feel like a lot of times when I was younger, I felt the need to, like, have like a consistent person to have sex with. Because it just felt more safe, right? Like safe and, in terms of like protection, right? Yeah. And not having to worry if this person is with a lot of other people, right. Because that's one thing in your, early 20s or whenever you decide to be sexually active. There's a lot of things that come into play, right? It's not just the sex. So,
right.
So I think as I was like looking this up, I was really interested in the reasons why people feel more comfortable sharing as a, in a relationship versus, as a single person. But yeah, so one of the things that came up in an article I found was where to have sex being one of the top reasons why there is a difference between sex in a relationship versus sex while single. And I thought this was really interesting because I never considered location. Usually that's something that, is figured out fairly quickly in terms of like when you have decided to have sex with a person, you figure out pretty quickly, like, okay, so like we've made eye contact a lot this whole time and we're either like making out and or filling each other up. So like, what's it going to be? Like, do you, you didn't come here with like no escape plan, right? Like this is like a bank robbery. Like you've got the goods. Like, where are you taking it? Right? Like,
right.
Where's your Uber?
Yeah.
Where's your getaway car? Like, is your friend picking you up? Are we taking like the local bus home? Like, what's going on? How are we getting from here to point sex? Right?
Yeah.
Like that's
sex. Yes.
So what do you think about that? I mean, have you ever had any encounters where you thought that like this might not happen because we literally don't have somewhere to go? And we've all been in college, so you can be honest.
True. Well, you and I shared a room in college. So we had to share a room in a tiny little box. And I know. The rent was crazy. And so,
fun memories, though. Those are good memories to look back.
That was real fun. Yeah, no, we had a great time. But I'm just saying, I think that proves that anything is possible if you believe. And so... But on the flip side, I will say that I have had instances where like a roommate is home, for example, where I'm like, okay, this is a no-go. These are my place. And I wouldn't always feel comfortable going back to someone else's place. I just think you were saying, there are more questions when you're going for a hookup than, am I getting it in or am I not? There are other precautions you have to take. And so with that being said, there have been times where I'm like, okay, I don't think this is going to be the night, sir, So.
Okay. So that's actually really interesting because I wasn't even thinking of in terms as security, right?
Yeah.
Because like, this is just a question from a survey. This isn't like, they don't deep dive into all the reasonings. I'm sure maybe if they did a follow-up, I'm sure maybe they could, but that's a really important point to make, right? Sometimes it's not just about how you're going to get there, or if it's, or if you have roommates, it's also too, if you don't have the place to host, right? The safety aspect of it all, and just making sure that you're not really going to have much of like a sex drive if you're like worried that this person is about to take you like to somewhere that you are not going to feel safe, right?
Right.
Which is probably why this is one of the most, I mean, not just because of security, a lot of reasons, but I think that this is why this is like one of the top reasons as to why, sex in a relationship is different, because where to have sex actually could bring up a lot of like anxiety and, just questions. Yeah. You're not always thinking with your head, I mean, guys are, but we'll see. Anyways, so to keep on this conversation, one of the other main reasons of why there is a big difference for most people, right? This isn't all people, of why sex in a relationship versus single is different is also keeping it interesting. Basically, keeping it interesting can be a range of things. It's not just about keeping it interesting as far as like sexual positions and things like that. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times when we think of like interesting sex, at least for myself, when I was reading this, I was thinking like, oh yeah, interesting sex, like, yeah, missionary, like that's like boring, even though that's like what I do like 90% of the time. But and so I was just like, oh yeah, like cowgirl and do those things more and like all these things. But actually keeping it interesting was more so the lead up to the sex. And so a lot of people were talking
different things. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Keeping it interesting, whether it be kinks, which we will get into separately. That's going to be a separate topic, yes. But different kinks, also making sure, like that you're not pressured to look or act a certain way before sex. Because a lot of times before we meet our significant other, like before we get into a relationship with them, we might always go out and look a certain way, right? If you go out on a Friday night versus Tuesday night sex with your partner, you look very different, right? Those are two very different personas, right? One might be tired from like the Tuesday fatigue.
Right.
One is like, I just want to like go out and dance and like shake my boobs all around, and like whoever is in the middle of those boobs can, enjoy. And so that was like one of the big reasons a lot of people that were basically commenting that keeping it interesting was actually a lot more sexy than the actual sex act. So most people weren't actually concerned with like sexual positions like I thought it would be. Because sexual positions, I think that really is just kind of case by case basis, right? Like every individual is going to have a different preference, and that's not going to be what gets you to the sex, if that makes sense.
That's a really good point. And thinking about it, right, we kind of touched on that in the beginning. You are anticipating, like the anticipation and the excitement beforehand is really more of the thrill. It's not like you go into a bar and lock eyes with a guy and you're like, oh my God, doggy style right now, like come here, that's not like, you might be thinking you want to have sex with him, but at least in my experience, I'm not thinking of specific positions.
So
from the jump.
Okay, fair enough.
You might start to fantasize about where it could lead, and that's not to, obviously that could lead to that thought. But I think from the jump, the excitement, the thrill beforehand is where the excitement is building.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Although I have fantasized about certain men in certain positions, certain women in certain positions. And also too, like the thing is that because I think the whole position thing of it also just depends on like height and body weight and things like that. Like it depends on like if I see like just a fucking tree of a man, or something. And I'm like, God damn, like I would climb that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I will Dora explore his ass all night. But that's not the norm, right? Like if I just see a person that I'm attracted to and we have good conversation and, we're kind of just like hitting it off. That's very like when we get there, that'll be exciting to figure out then. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. I don't think I have the same kind of excitement as a short woman. There is a little more hesitation when I'm like, okay, what are the logistics here? I'm barely 5 foot, what are we going to have to do here? I've heard horror stories, not horror stories to other people, but I'm like, oh, people really think that. So I think I'm a little scarred, I'm a little traumatized from things I've heard that I don't want to,
Oh, so we can't discuss the idea of a spinner.
Ugh, it's just not. I'm a whole person. You know what I mean? And if I want you to call me that, then you can call me that. But you don't get to call me that when I walk into a bar and I'm trying to get drinks with my friends. You don't get to say that, which has happened, by the way, at a karaoke bar. This is not like, we're not at the club. We're at a karaoke bar. You remember. So
I do remember.
you don't get to say that, and where do you think that's going to lead? Where's that going to lead? Like, did you just call me a spinner? Will you buy me a drink? No. So we have to elaborate a little bit, because I have to elaborate a little bit just for the audience, also for my own enjoyment, because I think this is like a wonderful story. But the only reason I think it's a wonderful story is because, like, the nerve of people, like the audacity, like I think it's so interesting that people would actually have the nerve to say this, which is probably why I like cringy, shows and movies and things like that. Because it just astounds me that people can just like walk up with the confidence to say something like this. So for those of you that may not know, the term spinner, right? So literally, like, the term spinner, to our knowledge, me and Morgan's knowledge, if you have more knowledge on it, we'd love to know. But a spinner is a sexual interaction between a very tall person and a shorter person, meaning that the shorter person I don't think the other person has to be that tall. I think it's just in reference to the girl, a petite girl, or petite woman, or it might be more versatile than for women. You know what I mean? This might be an all-encompassing term. Oh yeah. Oh no. You know what I mean? There's definitely some twinks out there that are spinners also. Yes.
So basically what it means is that you are small enough or compact enough in size to spin on a dick, right? So like that's the idea, so that you can like spin all around it and they can like spin you around, right? Which is just like so silly. You're not like this ballerina that they're like winding up and you're just like, woo, like look at you go. Like that's not like whatever. The whole idea of it is like very, I think, rooted in like porn fantasy. I would say like that seems like something that would come from like some type of porn fantasy or just like fantasy idea. Anyways, point being, this idea that when you meet somebody and you're like having these kind of sexual fantasies, I think that it can add to the experience, but also too, expectations is like a quick way to like really just take a nosedive and like not enjoy something. Like if you put expectations on every person that you meet, especially sexually, that's just like setting them up for failure and setting yourself up for disappointment, right?
Right.
Because again, this will be also in another episode, but as far as statistics for orgasming, like it really is, it's sadder than you would want to know. Like you can't go into every sexual encounter thinking that you're going to like have this like just jaw-dropping amazing experience and you're gonna leave just like, swaying from side to side because like you've just been dicked down so well. Like that shouldn't be the expectation, because that's just not the reality of sex.
Right.
All the time, at least.
Set that expectation, because I've had the opposite. Had the spinner experience, then met someone who was like, I'm going to put it down. I'm going to, and I'm just like, whoa, okay. Did he put it down? No.
So no, he didn't. Yeah. Short answer. Yeah. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
He did not put it down. And I did put that story in the notes, which we can come back to. But those were basically the top two reasons that I thought were most interesting. Yeah, where to have sex, like the location being a very big deal for people, and actually turning down a lot of situations, like being like, I don't know where we're going, let's not do this. And then the second most common one being keeping it interesting, which again, it varies from person to person, but a lot of it has to do with the pre-situation, right? Everything that comes before the actual sex. Not just the pre-cum, although that is exciting, I will say, in a relationship. So I'll just give like a little story here. So me and my partner have been together for a while. We have really good sex. And I think one of the reasons why we have really good sex is because we don't put expectations on our sex. Like, if the mood so strikes us and we can like, go to our room for like 10 minutes, I'm saying like we have to like get away or something. It's COVID times. We're not anywhere. We're at home. I'm like,
Right.
let's
It's just
like
the two of you all over the
go
house.
to the library.
Oh.
Yeah. No, we're not going to the
brag.
library.
They have a library.
Yeah. It's in the process. It's in the process, but it will be a library one day. It has books. They're just in boxes still. But I think that's one of the reasons why it's really still very pleasurable and really satisfying, is because keeping it interesting, like I said, is just the mood so striking, right? Like if one of us gets in the mood or, and one of us like is feeling like especially horny one day, we can like be honest about that because we have that kind of rapport. Mm-hmm. But that's not always the case. That's like not always the case for relationships. There are actually, insecurities still in relationships, right? Like if you are a person that still has insecurities in your own person, it's going to affect your relationship. It's not just going to go away because you have somebody else to lean on, right? Codependence much? Which we will also get into in a later episode. This is really interesting. I will say one thing I didn't plan for as much with this topic was how many experiences that come to mind that are like relatable.
Like reliving. It's just flashing through your head. All these memories.
I know. Is that called trauma? Is that what trauma is? I don't know. But anyways, point being, I think it's really interesting because I think one of the things that for me as a person who was definitely, exploring my sexuality and still is, I'm still figuring out more parts of my sexuality. I think that, and we will get into sexuality, in later episodes as well, but I think that for a person being in a monogamous relationship, at least for right now, as far as, we'll always be monogamous in terms of as far as like who's actually in our relationship. But we've both been very honest about, still being interested in other people, and like, that doesn't always have to mean that you're bringing a whole nother person into your relationship, right?
Right.
And so I think
you guys have that communication open. I mean, that's the biggest thing. If you are, we think of monogamy, it's exclusive, married for the rest of your life, and that's just not your style. But you guys have, found that out about each other, and now you can explore that together.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually brings us partially to our second topic under this kind of umbrella, just talking about why sex is interesting for people and what changes about that in a relationship. Okay. So like I had mentioned earlier, kinks was one of the most common reasons why some people, not all people, but why some people find it interesting to have hookups, right? Because sometimes they think that they're more open to trying new kinks, things like that, right? Yeah. And so when we're talking about kinks, this can really range, right? Like kinks can mean something simple, like being, bitten on the lip or shoulder, or, scratching on the back, all the way to like dominatrix sub, BDSM, relationship, BDSM, right? Which we will also get into on another episode. I'm sure Morgan's really excited for that one. But really though, kinks I think is one of those things where I always more attributed it or connected it to BDSM, right? Really extreme versions of that, right? Right. And this goes kind of into porn fantasy as well, which is also something that, and again, I'll get there, but this is something that can really put pressure on relationships because you are expected to perform. Sometimes in specific relationships, you're expected to perform at the same level each time. Whereas if it is just a hookup, you really don't have to worry about that as much because, again, this is just a random person and you can't really have expectations for a person that you've never been with intimately. Right. Oh. And so this is really interesting. So this is my question to you. So do you think, she's like, what now?
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Hot seat. Yeah. Do you think that there is any pressure just from your experience, whatever porn that you have watched or experienced, do you think that there is pressure to perform a certain way in, single encounters? When you're a single person, just going out, maybe you went to, a local club, music show, bar, whatever it may be, right? And you meet a person that you're, interested in, And yeah, you could see it potentially going somewhere for the night, right? You could see yourself maybe leaving with this person, going somewhere, having a hookup or whatever. Do you think that you've ever thought about, like anything having to do with like expectations that you've seen from porn fantasy? And so you can take a second to think about it.
I don't think it's specifically from porn fantasy.
Okay.
But I think, you both have the same goal to finish, right? So I
or
think
do we?
Yeah. Well, that's the goal. That's the goal, right? But
it's a journey. It's about the journey, Morgan.
Okay. So pressure-wise, I think the expectation to finish, that's certainly one. And that's interesting about the kinks being tied in, because the expectation to perform a certain way, I guess if you go in knowing that, but I would think kinks maybe wouldn't always tie into a one-night stand or a hookup necessarily. So that's interesting.
But this is the thing, right? So kinks can range. So if you're talking about something as simple as if you're kissing somebody and they bite your lip and that's something that really turns you on, that's a simple expectation that you could have going into it, right? Oh, like there's going to be more of that, right? Which also has an effect on the way. So porn fantasy isn't just, I shouldn't say porn fantasy in a way that's like very specific to literal videos of people having sex. I also mean porn fantasy is, it's kind of a representation of what we deem is like acceptable in society, or things that society does not deem acceptable, right? Like it can be both. It can be the extreme version of what we see on the day-to-day, right? Like you're getting your pizza delivered and the pizza delivery guy's hot. You have like a little like sexual fantasy about him right there. Right. And that's the porn video of that, right? The porn version of that is, can I fuck you under, while eating pizza or something like that? Right. Whatever. I don't know. Eating while having sex is like a whole kink in itself. It is. But that is also, there's also societal standards on what is accepted and what should be done like in the bedroom, right? And so porn can be either of those. It can be extreme version of something very normal and mundane, or it can be something that is very taboo in our normal culture, right? Something like that. So it can be either of those two. So I guess more so when you're talking about porn fantasy, it's because in porn, anything can happen, right? You can look up almost anything. And if that suits you, is that going to have an influence on the way that you see your next hookup, right? Is that going to have a lasting effect on you versus with your partner, right? So I'll answer this a little bit for you from a perspective of me being in a relationship. Okay, so me and my partner, we've watched porn together. We've talked about like what we do like to watch as far as like if we do look up something, with porn. And we like very different things, right? Which makes sense, right? He has a penis, I have a vagina, so we're going to want to see pleasure in very different ways, right? Because what he likes to see stimulated is not always going to be what makes sense for me to be stimulated, right? Yeah, and that's, and that's totally normal.
Absolutely.
Right. However, if you're not open about that communication, and if you don't know, right, what your partner likes and what they are looking up, and that's not to say we share every single video, but generally what we like, we will share. And so if we were like, just say for instance, we didn't share, like, right, well, like what we watched in porn, and then we came together to have sex, like say for instance, it was a long week and we weren't really sexually active. But at the end of the week, we finally come together. Now, that doesn't mean I haven't orgasmed that whole week, right? That just means we haven't done it together, right?
Right.
And so I think personally that does somewhat have an effect, because what I've been seeing and what's been stimulating me in porn is not exactly what he's going to do with me when we have sex, right?
Right.
And so sometimes, and it's not all the time, and I also try to kind of like moderate how much I do watch porn, because it really can like affect that part of your libido, like that part of your sex drive can really just kind of be a little bit like it's kind of skewed, right? Like it's kind of like, well, this is what I've been being stimulated with, and now I'm with this person and they're not doing that. So it's kind of like you kind of have to, for me at least, I do take like breaks from watching porn because I don't like to have those expectations of my partner, right? Because I think he's great at what he does and what we do together.
Right. Yeah, and it takes away from that.
Right.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So I don't think I've taken expectations into it per se, but I feel like expectations have been taken into a hookup with me.
That's good.
yeah. There was a time that we were in Vegas and you were there, you and I, when I say we,
I know, I'm like, who?
Yeah. There. You're like, who'd you go to Vegas with? I'm the only person. So there was a time we went to Vegas. We went up to that penthouse. We met those guys that time.
Yes, we did.
Yes. And I did hook up with one of the guys and the sex was pretty rough. It was pretty good, but I didn't know how rough it was until we got back from Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you remember when I was changing and you were like, oh my God, what happened to you? And I'm a peach. I just have to say, yeah,
tell us what peach means, Morgan. Tell us what peach means.
I bruise very easily. I don't know. I'm just very sensitive. I touch like a corner and it's done for,
Yes.
So I peach very easily. I bruise very easily. And so I look like I got beat when I came back. When we got back from Vegas, your face when I was changing, remember? You're like, oh my God, what happened to you?
It was very noticeable. It was very noticeable.
But I had no idea. But looking back, now that we've kind of now that we're having this conversation and talking about it, I'm like, oh, okay. It feels like the way he approached that situation was probably coming from that fantasy, that expectation, that we were talking about. So in that instance, I do see that playing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. And like, that's the thing. I think also too, so if you even think about just like movies in general, right? There's an over exaggeration of real life that has to happen, right? Like, say for instance, and we'll get to this is actually the next topic, but say for instance, there's an awkward moment, right? Between two people just out at the grocery store, right? There's just some weird awkward moment. If you were just to watch that, right, like on YouTube or something, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe awkward. However, when you put that into like a movie, right, it's obviously has to be exaggerated for the point of everybody sees what the awkwardness is. You have to understand what is going on for it to be an awkward moment, right? Mm-hmm. And so same thing, if you apply that to porn, it has to be a little bit over exaggerated. Obviously, it doesn't have to be as over exaggerated. I mean, like, Jesus, like you don't literally have to pound me. Like you don't have to, but that act, like pounding, a person like with a dick, like that over exaggeration, like that really emphasis on like the dick just like really hitting there. Like, first of all, like, okay, like I'm not a robot. I'm not a sex toy. Like be easy. You know what I mean? Like I have to use this later. Like the vagina is not only for pounding. I actually have to like pee and like have a period and like be a whole person after this.
My life. Yeah.
Exactly. So in that way, I think that, that it does happen. And I think that it would be more common and maybe not, but I think that it would be more common in hookups just because it's like, this might be the only time I hook up with you. So why not try out what I was watching, the other day? Because that was really hot.
And if, you don't have feelings for that person or they're only for the night, you're like, well, I do want to rail a girl. So let me, try this out on so-and-so I just met 2 minutes ago, That's
really true.
Yeah,
that's very true. So I think as far as sex in a relationship versus sex being single, like it's not always that, like the same awkward moments can happen. Let me tell you. Okay. I lean into awkward moments. I have no problem with awkward moments. Like
you do love the cringe.
It's basically my life at this point. However, there are moments with my partner where I definitely want to be a little bit more, fantasy like, right? And if I buy lingerie, if I buy something that's very skimpy, I don't want to trip over like the vibrator cord because it's charging so that we can use it later. You know what I mean? Like doesn't really hit the same. You know what I mean? Like it, for lack of a better word. But anyways, so that was actually, like I said, so leading into, awkward moments, which we kind of covered, but basically in one of the articles, and we will reference all of our articles, just by the way, at the end of each episode, just so that if you are interested in looking up a little bit more, you totally can. But awkward moments was actually one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people felt that they didn't want to hook up as much as maybe their sexual drive would allow them to. So awkward moments, I think this is something that, again, like for myself, that's kind of like my life. Like I'm tripping over everything. I barely know how to walk. Like at this point, awkward moments is just something that I have to accept and laugh through. But that's not the same for everyone, right? Because a lot of people really pride themselves or have confidence in their, ability to maintain a certain facade, right? To look a certain way, to hold themselves up a certain way and, maintain that in front of people. But my question is, and this is just a curiosity, my question is, are awkward moments something that can be avoided? Like, we're talking about sex here, people. Like, have you seen a dick? Like, it goes from this, like, to this, and if you can't see my hand, it goes from flaccid to hard. Like, it's all over the place, And same thing with vaginas. Like, they're not all the same, Even if you're having an encounter with someone of the same sex, like, it's not like you're just like, oh, like scissors. Like, that's hilarious. The idea of, like, two women doing this, just like, I mean, and again, hey, whoever's doing that, do you? I don't care. I mean, do what you want with your vagina. But it's just funny because it's like, that's like the fantasy. This is kind of this idea that like, oh, well, if there's two of them and they look like this, they must, hit perfectly, and it's like, okay, well, we don't all have the same leg size. So I don't know what to tell you.
That's true.
So that's my question. Right. Yeah. So that's my question. Do you think that awkward moments are avoidable? Is that something that can be avoided, as a single person?
I don't think so. I mean, one, awkward moments being the reason that you don't hook up as single or that you prefer to be in a relationship seems like I just am curious from this survey or where they found this information. Are these people saying, oh, I was mid hookup, but then something awkward happened and I left? Or are they saying they avoided the hookup altogether with the fear of something awkward happening?
Okay.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, okay. Yeah. So I get what you're saying. And I think that it's more so like, well, so I'll be honest. I have had sexual encounters that when it gets a little awkward, I guess, no, that's not true. It's before the sexual encounter actually happens that if something kind of doesn't fit right, and I'm not talking about the penis, not if the penis fits. It usually fits. That's just like a rule of thumb. Anyways, but if something about our energies or, like our conversation or something is off and it leads to kind of like an awkward pause, and not like a good awkward pause where it's like, oh, there's no more conversation because we're so hot and bothered. No, I mean like an awkward, there's nothing else to do but fuck. And if not but fuck, well, I mean, you could but fuck, but there's nothing else to do but have sex at this point. Yeah. So we're either going to do it or like, I'm going to leave because like, I'm not really into you enough mentally to like continue this conversation.
Which I'm guilty of both. I'm like, we should probably just have sex to like, not have to pretend to want to talk to each other anymore, then hopefully you'll leave.
Fair enough. I
want to get some, but I don't think I want to talk to you tomorrow.
Right.
I definitely have had that thought. So, yes. but also I think if it's an awkward moment during sex, then I don't think I'd want to be with someone who couldn't laugh at themselves. So I think my thought on that would be, okay, if they're going to make it weird, then that's probably someone I don't really care to have any kind of further or whatever,
So this is interesting. This actually leads us into our, kind of last topic of this discussion, which we may have to revisit. We love revisiting, so we may have to do that. Yeah. But it is about like dating apps and how the expectations from dating apps, right? Depending on the dating app, right? And we will have a completely separate episode just about like dating on apps and what that looks like, right? Navigating the virtual world for hookups and relationships. Like,
Yikes.
we have experience with both, and it is like the wild, wild west. Like, everybody is just out there in the virtual space.
Tell me, they're like, I would hate to use dating apps. I'm like, and then they're like, well, why didn't you have a boyfriend? What? Which is it? Yes.
Yeah, you either want me to date.
Right. What are all these double standards? Where do I go from here? Not on Tinder. Not on Bumble.
Oh, we will get into all of those fun things. Yes.
Yes.
But one of the reasons why sexual encounters tend to be dissatisfying, or not necessarily always not satisfied, but I think they don't meet up to the expectations, is because you kind of have to put your best self out there, right?
Right.
And so you're trying to, and again, right? Like, I can speak from personal experience. You do want to have a certain level of like real versus like, I can be this also, right? Like, I kind of have these different sides to me, and you kind of have to juggle how to show those, right? And kind of have to balance, like, how do I show that, I like to read really nerdy books, but I also am like a very sexual person, but I also don't want to be objectified. And like, like you want to show all these different parts of yourself. And that's why I think sexual encounters really they don't have to be, this idea of like organic. I don't think you have to meet somebody in person for it to be like a good sexual encounter. I've definitely had good hookups based from apps and things like that. But I do think that this can lead to more awkward moments from dating apps, just because all you have to base it off of is like these few pictures, right? These few blurbs that the person, or comments, whatever that this person said. And especially hookups, for me at least, I had a lot less conversation with the person before, right? So it wasn't like, ooh, we're like sexy texting for like a week and this is just going and build up and, I gotta have to see you. No, it's like, hey, it's 11:30, so
you busy?
Yeah. Yeah, you home?
Right. You up? Yeah.
Right, and so, but on the flip side of that, right, like, if it is something that's very spur of the moment, very in the moment, and you're just like, look, I'm on this app, like, are you down? Like, let's do this. I feel like some of those kind of awkward moments that happen more like I said, like tripping over my vibrator, like with my like partner, probably won't happen, because you do kind of get that heat of the moment, like, let's just do this, right? We both know what we're here for. Right. And if you're lucky, we'll both come, right?
Yeah. If you're lucky. Mm-hmm.
If you're lucky, and we'll get all into that. But yeah, so, again, I don't think that I was setting out to find out about every sexual encounter. I think that for each person, this looks very different. But I do want to ask the question, are we doing this wrong? Is there something about sexual encounters that we haven't cracked the code? Like, are we still chipping back the layers of what like the sexual encounter should be like? I don't know. Do you feel like you've been doing it wrong for all these years? Be honest.
I'd say someone's doing it wrong in my sexual encounters. I'm not going to take all the blame. Let's just say.
Fair enough.
But
go ahead.
I see the pros, but I feel like, coming from the perspective that I am, majority of my life been single. And so, I'm kind of thinking, these awkward moments, this and that, the vulnerability, the trying new things is more so happening when you're in a relationship. And so talking about the things that you've brought up in your research really shows that doesn't seem to be the case. And looking back on my experiences, my past encounters, I am realizing like, I've had some weird, some fun, some not so fun, some disappointing, some crazy, like,
right.
It's a mixed bag,
It really is. It really is. It's like Pandora box. You don't know what's going to come out. You also don't know if you're going to come. And I just want to say that. I want to emphasize that before we end this episode. You really don't know if you're going to come. Like, you don't know if that at the end of that rainbow is just a beautiful little, Lucky Charm pocket of cum. You you don't know if that's gonna happen. You don't know. And so I think for me, there's definitely been experiences where I felt like I was doing it wrong. Like I felt like I wasn't living up to expectations, or that I wasn't really in it. You know, like I was just like, this is just kind of sex for sex's sake. Like I'm just a horny person, like trying to like quiet the horny voice in my head because it's always there. You know what I mean? All right. And we just want to make sure that we give a shout out to ProBonoASL. Thank you so much for our awesome interpreters sticking with us through all of this madness. Just really just being great people, supporting all this madness that we were talking about here. Please feel free to follow us on all social media, mainly Instagram at Wrong the Podcast. And also, please like, subscribe if you are watching us for the visual conversation on YouTube. Please feel free to leave us a comment. Do you have any comments? Have you experienced any of this as well? Please let us know. We would love to converse with you all and get it out there. You know, we all need therapy and we all don't have enough money for therapy. So get it out there. Let's chat.
We are here for you. Absolutely. And don't forget to tune in to the next episode of Am I Doing This Wrong?